Okay. Oh, well, welcome to the July 18th meeting of the Kennebunkport Planning Board. I see that we are short Neil, who told me he would not be making it. So that means that one of our alternates gets to vote. So I guess why don't we start with George alphabetically?
Well, Larry's technically Charles.
Well, I was going by last names, but
Oh, okay. That's fine.
I'll defer to George.
All right.
okay. Well, actually, we could you could do 1 and 3, and Larry can do 2,
Okay.
and that'll work.
That's fine.
Okay. Anyhow. So, attendance is taken care of. Approval of minutes. We don't seem to have copies of the minutes, but we all received them in the mail. Did anyone have any issues with the minutes as received? No, why don't we just...
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as is.
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor? All right. So we now move to item 180601, Marybanks Strom Revocable Trust, Atlantic Environmental Authorized Agent, the initial review for approval of a 3 by 20 foot ramp and an 8 by 10 foot float on Ocean Ave. So,
Hi,
Hi.
My name's Lisa Vickers. I'm here representing the Marybanks Strom Revocable Trust that owns property at 86 Ocean Ave. They have a residential structure. They have a driveway that extends to a garage that's actually partially located over Chicks Creek. The remainder of the shoreline is ledge, rockweed covered ledge, so it's difficult to get down to the water, and they are looking for safe access to Chicks Creek for paddleboarding, kayaking, maybe even like a flat bottom boat. So we looked at the site, and what we came up with was the existing garage, as I mentioned, it's partially located over Chicks Creek, and it has a deck on the creek side. So what they are proposing to do is attach a 3 by 20 seasonal ramp made out of aluminum to a 8 by 10 seasonal float, which will be made out of like a composite material, so it's lightweight. It'll be anchored in place with cross chains. We looked at this site because one of the kind of tricky aspects of the site is that one of the performance standards in the ordinance is you have to be 1/5, you cannot exceed 1/5 bank to bank. The highest annual tide is typically where we measure the top of the bank. And in this situation, if you just look straight across, here's the proposed dock. If you look straight across, you have this cove. And we would have the distance there, but we wanted to sort of take into consideration that, you know, if you're standing here, you could see a rock ledge outcrop there. So we actually met with Warner and kind of talked about it, and came to the conclusion that if we take certain distances across the bank and come up with an average, that's a reasonable way to see if we actually do meet that standard. So we have a laser rangefinder. We took some points, and then using aerial imagery, we took that data from the actual ground, and our average bank-to-bank distance is 160. The ramp and float, the actual distance that measures is 30 feet, but however the bank is a little bit under the deck, so it extends approximately 31.4. So the bank-to-bank under our average is 32 feet. We came out about 31.4. So it is close, but again, if we just were to go, which we normally do, is just go straight across, we would have a measurement with plenty of, you know, distance. But again, we wanted to take into consideration that this is most likely a navigational standard, and so we wanted to be considerate of people that do utilize the creek. Also, we met with the River Committee, and they looked at it from the navigational perspective and approved it with that additional information. It has been reviewed by the Army Corps of Engineers, and we have received approval. Also, before we applied to these agencies, we did reach out to Department of Marine Resources just to see what sort of habitat issues may be out there, and they noted that it is mapped for shellfish. However, it's prohibited because of water quality, or harvesting is prohibited. There's no finfish habitat that they're aware of based on the geology, hydrology, ecology of the area, but they did recommend that we elevate the float 18 inches off of the substrate at all tides. So that's an Army Corps recommendation as well. So we have it elevated off the substrates, which is mixed, coarse, and fines. And again, the float will be secured in place with cross chains that'll be pinned back underneath the deck so they don't extend out into the creek. They're seasonal structures, so the intent is to basically in the off-season detach these floats from the cross chains, and they're lightweight. They're called AccuDock, which is like a composite. Getting several people to basically carry them up and then store them in the garage. Same idea for the aluminum ramp. And I'm happy to answer any questions or clarify anything.
Why is there no MDEP permit?
Because this is all seasonal, and so if you have, and although it is attached to a permanent structure, if that permanent structure predates the Natural Resource Protection Act, it does not require a permit from the DEP. And I can certainly provide documentation for that if you would like.
Well, I know from experience, and I've said this before when the other dock went in there, that this is a wildfowl breeding habitat. And the more docks that go in there, the less wildfowl you're gonna get. Plus, these docks, we seem to be multiplying dock after dock after dock in Kennebunkport. And I think they really ruin a scenic view. So those are, I think your proposed plans are fine, but I have some problems with that.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at the significant wildlife habitat, which is usually mapped as tidal waterfowl or shorebird feeding or shorebird roosting, that's usually, through the DEP review, and we usually, it would go to IFNW and their comments. But again, we do several, quite a few of these, and I understand your concerns. But also, as the homeowner, they're worried about safety too, and getting down and being able to use the creek for, again, like I said, kayaks and paddle boards, and there's a variety of ages using it, and it is, difficult to drag a kayak necessarily down the slippery rock and so forth. So that's their ultimate project goal, is the safe access. So, but I hear your concerns.
But I could tell you that most of the time that is mud. And you can't float very much on it.
They'll get about a couple hours on either side of high tide, and again, it's not like they're going out for the day on a big motorboat that they're gonna they're just kayaking.
No, I understand that. It just seems like okay. My opinion is that every time these docks go in, it seems more like people are increasing the value of their property rather than using them for boating and recreational purposes.
So, our, the answer on item 15 here, the 1/5 issue, is we may, upon review, modify the length requirement if it is demonstrated that no other reasonable alternative exists to provide water access from the lot. So I think our business is we have to document that very thing, that we agree or not that this is a reasonable way to give them access to the water.
Tom, can I comment? The
Please.
selectmen had a site visit,
Yes.
which I attended on this, and there really isn't a viable way to walk down to the water. They're going to attach this to the deck.
To the
off
deck,
back,
yeah, I saw that.
and walk down that way. At least in my opinion, it satisfied that concern that there isn't another way to do it. Certainly, and even if there was, you would be dragging your canoe down over a fairly steep axis.
Yeah.
Can I comment to that though? We're not actually requesting that you modify the length requirement.
Sure.
Well,
The word average does not occur anywhere in the
Oh,
length
okay. I see
requirement,
what
so
you're
you are asking for a
Well,
waiver.
if we don't take the average and we just go straight across bank to bank, I guess the question, that's why we met with Warner, was would you assume it's just straight across? Because that's how we normally do it. We look at it just straight across. But again, we were sort of trying to be considerate that these, this is a rock ledge outcrop right here. And so that brings our average down. But just straight across, it's a greater distance.
Yeah. No, I mean, the ordinance, certainly isn't clear, in terms of where that, how you do that 1/5 measurement. And, when we met to talk about it, we felt it was helpful just so that folks could see all of those dimensions across there so that you knew what you were dealing with. But generally speaking, that 1/5 requirement, is dealing specifically, meant to deal specifically with navigational issues.
Yes. And how is this navigationally, because it is blocking more than 20% if you look at it at an angle down like this.
Correct.
So,
Yeah, I mean, I think the photographs, the area really, help, in terms of understanding, what that cove looks like. It's not, it's, in the true definition of, a navigable, waterway. I don't really think that it quite qualifies as that. It's not, it's not like you're dealing with the, the main portion of the river. Although certainly, you can, I think the traffic that you have up and down through there is primarily limited to, kayaks and
the same kind of things that they're talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But doesn't that make it more important to be navigable because it's so narrow in there? Because it's not really part of the river where you get main boats and so forth, but there'll be other kayaks and paddle boards and so forth.
And other floats. Yeah. Well, maybe you can talk a little bit about the access to that area and what that, what that looks like, what the, what impediments are, further on down to the
Right.
river.
Yeah, the channel is sort of consistent down, sort of in the southerly direction. And then as you come up this way, again, you have a rock, it's a ledge outcrop there. And this is, if you're talking about kayaks and canoes that are typically using that, from this, again, the bank, the top of what we could say the high single tide, it's still 114 feet. And the channel, the thread of the channel actually sort of comes out like this. You can kind of see it in the photographs. Let me see, direct you to, if you look at photograph 3, that's looking in a southerly direction. And so it's kind of taken from the deck area. But you can sort of see how the channel, it swerves this way to the wider part of that portion. And then it goes out here. And then this is sort of a wider cove area that you have.
So on photograph 3 and then again on photograph 5, both looking at similar views.
Correct.
That's low tide. So if this will be sticking out at high tide, just about on photograph 5, about where the edge of the rockweed is there.
Correct, just where the kind of mixed.
And is that another float further beyond there?
I think that's I'm not sure if that's an actual like deck area. I know there's a float across here. I know that the abutting property is constructing a deck as well, and there's one, photograph 6, you can't see it, but there's one in that cove as well. I don't, because we were there in February, so float wouldn't typically be in place at that time of year, so I think it's more of
Right.
like a upland structure.
I'm interested to know how many floats are along Chicks Creek.
Okay.
In the summertime, how far they stick out into the navigable channel.
Okay.
I understand at a high tide it goes out bank to bank, but it's very shallow. When it goes out, it goes out. It's a very small window of navigable water. So I'd like to know what else is sticking out into the navigation channel.
Sure.
So, anybody else have comments on the?
Well, I
Yes.
had a couple of questions.
Sure.
Maybe they're pretty elementary, I don't know, but Do you have other examples where this cross-chain configuration works?
Oh yeah, this is pretty standard
Standard
marine.
around here?
Yeah, sure. And sometimes what you see is actually you have it on both sides, you sort of have an X like this, or but it's a standard, and I'm happy to provide photographs, or if that would be helpful.
That's okay.
Okay.
And the other thing I noticed on your second sheet, or maybe second sheet, I tried to figure out what's the actual elevation of highest astronomical tide. I guess mean low water is 0, right? So mean high water, it'd be useful to see what actually tidal variation we're
Sure.
talking about.
Sure. I can add that. I don't have that information on me currently, but I can certainly get you the elevation for the highest annual.
And then, as we're sitting here, I'm just wondering, so, we're talking about the 1/5 limit on the bank to bank for the area occupied by the duck. So what would the configuration be? What configuration would satisfy that strict 1/5 requirement? I mean, what alternative
Do you mean
could you propose instead of
That's
30
how
feet
you
and
calculate the 1/5.
yeah, the 1/5.
Yeah.
How would that what configuration would satisfy that 1/5?
Well,
requirement?
like I said, typically what we do is go bank to bank, and that
point to
typically
point.
means, like I took it, this is
Straight across.
straight across from the middle of the float, and that comes out to 186. But again, I'm meeting with Werner, there's no real guidance in the ordinance. And I know that this comes from Chapter 1000, which is from the DEP, but this is unique to Kennebunk and Kennebunkport, the 1/5. So, Army Corps has it's not bank to bank, but they also have something that's you can't extend more than 20% across the waterway. So, I don't know if you use that as guidance or.
All right. So there isn't actually no alternative solution that would satisfy any.
Just the point to point, you couldn't take the total volume and say it is a little bit less than 20%. I mean, I guess you
25.
just,
Well, that's what we tried to show is like here's these different measurements, because we didn't really know of any other,
right. You kind
obvious
of did it on volume
or just
and you were,
yeah,
It
the
was
distance,
acceptable.
right? Yeah. Again, when we first met the River Committee, they had similar concerns about the navigation, and that's when they wanted to hear what Werner would have to say about it, and so that's what we came up with as a.
What if it were shorter?
Well, it would be difficult. We initially did have a 22-foot long ramp, and we shortened it to 20 because with low tide it does get fairly steep, and obviously you're not going to be using it. Not to say that they can't just go sit down and sit on the float or something, but I mean for pure water access, it just gets really steep the shorter you go, and so. I mean, we could certainly look into it, but it would only be a matter of a couple feet, I think, and.
Well, if you got down to 23 feet, which is, that would be a fifth of the 114 foot. Or what if you had steps going down?
Well, part of the problem, is just that, again, normally we start these structures, pretty close to the highest annual tide line, maybe a couple feet back, but, we couldn't do that because it's literally the deck is already there.
Yeah.
So I can again, working with, marine contractor, we sort of shortened it up as much as we felt comfortable too, because again, if you even shorten the float, then you get the weight of the ramp on that float, and it just be too heavy for something small.
And what's tricky if you try to move that, if you try to take that dock and move it further around the cove, you've got a pretty significant ledge outcrop.
Yeah.
That runs that runs through there. So even if you were to take that and I think instead of having it attached to the deck and instead have it attached to the ground, you'd be directly in conflict with that significant ledge outcrop.
Could you tell us again who you have approvals from?
Army Corps of Engineers and the River Committee, and the harbor master was at that
And
meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
So one thought that occurred to me was, the issue is you want to have the ramp not too steep when the float is on the bottom, but you can't use the float, or, well, they can't use the dock, well, because of the fact that the water recedes much farther, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what about supporting it up off the bottom so that your ramp was relatively shallower,
Mm-hmm.
but you would still use the flow while there was enough water to actually launch something in it. So you'd support the thing off the bottom by some,
Yeah.
piles or something, concrete piles. I don't know.
Yeah.
That way
I
you
got-
wouldn't have the problem about the big steep angle, and then you could shorten it up, and objections diminish.
Yeah, that would be a unique approach. There are, float stops, which kind of elevate, float skids are sort of constructed on the float, whereas float stops are actually put into the substrate and left in year round. I guess we try to avoid sort of a structure like that, because then it's a permanent structure in the resource, whereas this is just a seasonal.
Which would require
Is-
other approvals.
Yeah, we'd have to go to DEP,
Yeah.
unless they considered it, they have
What
interpretations.
about extending the stops on the bottom of the float, then it would be removed all at once?
Yeah, they're sort of like stringers that go along the float. So I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know how we couldn't. 18 inches is already fairly high, but yeah, I will certainly take this back and put my head together with my cohort and marine contractor and look at any way to shore it up. I mean, like I said, we did initially have it a little bit longer, but then once we ran these sort of average numbers, we pulled it back.
Because it might be interesting to know how many, on your next sheet, with showing the elevation. So you've got mean low water somewhere over there. So what is the actual elevation at the bottom of the float when it's sitting on the bottom? It'd be interesting to know those three elevations: bottom of the float, mean high water, and highest astronomical tide, as well as the number of hours per average day or per month that the float is actually floating in enough water for you to use it
Well, it'll be several hours on high tide that you'll be able to use it.
at high tide.
At high tide, several hours on either side of high tide.
So that's
yeah.
like 3 hours a day.
Yeah, I mean, but you have to remember too, these, if it's kayaking and paddleboarding and, those are activities that are usually, you go out for a bit and you come back. It's not like a long day where you're, planning on gassing up the boat and going for a picnic or something, so,
So I guess that the real question
Yeah.
is then, so what if they are kayaking and they get offshore and all of a sudden they discover that they can't get back in time before the tide goes out
That's
too
their
far, so they
that's
strand.
it, yeah.
The standard problem that people have
Should've watched the high
river
tide
all the
mark.
time.
Gotta launch the rescue boat, huh?
Shark.
Call their,
Anyway.
yeah.
So
Call
anyway,
their
if you
parents,
had
no.
those three elevations on there, I think it'd be clarifying.
So I think we have
All right, so,
enough information to proceed so we can have a public hearing.
Can I
You
just
have a bunch of-
clarify, one sec, you said the highest annual tide, mean high water, and
Well-
mean low water, or the bottom of the float?
yeah, highest astronomical tide, mean high water, and then the bottom of the float.
Bottom of the float, okay, gotcha.
When it rests on the channel there.
Sure,
Channel.
okay.
And you have George's questions.
And the number of floats, right,
Okay.
yeah.
And then whether you could extend the bottom of the
Being
float to
creative.
shorten up the bridge.
Sure.
Okay, well, so I guess we can accept a motion to make this, as this is complete, and we can have the public hearing in 2 weeks. So,
I'll make a motion to say it's complete.
I second it.
all right, all in favor? Okay, so we have August 1st, I guess, is the next meeting.
Yep.
We will have,
I'll get this information to you.
right, now I need a volunteer for being the case manager here. Our usual Stuckey on docks isn't here, but it's not fair to give him every single dock either. But anyway.
I'd be happy to.
Well, okay, you can get the last one from, you get the last doc from him. It was great. It was
Okay,
a work of art, as
Right.
Excellent, yes.
yeah. So you get that from Neil. Okay, well that brings us to item number 2 on the agenda, which is item 180602, Matthew and Donna Enoch, the Sebago Techniques authorized agent for approval of make minor improvements to a driveway, create better parking and landscaping at 41 Ocean Ave. So, Mr. Doe.
Thank you. I am Steve Doe from Sebago Technics, landscape architect. Here on behalf of Matthew and Donna Enoch. They own this property at 41 Ocean Avenue, and they're looking to do some modifications to the site plan and the architecture. Most of the property is within 75 feet of the high water mark. Excuse me. So the high water mark, this is Wharf Lane. I don't know if you're familiar with it. There's housing and some other residences down there. The high water mark actually comes over the road here. It comes into here and goes back out. The cove actually comes into this section and it goes back out. So 75 feet from that mark brings you out into here. So pretty much the entire property is within 75 feet. So there's a couple things they're looking to do there. When they purchased it, there was a gravel driveway right here that went to a garage under the house. They were getting flooding during high tides, astronomical high tides. The water actually come in, flood into the basement. So they went through code's office, got a permit to close that garage up and put some fill in there. There's still a little bit of the driveway there that they park in, but part of this application would be to modify that area, get rid of the driveway completely, actually elevate this area here high enough so that they can actually step out of the house onto a level lawn area so they can kind of look at the water. Donna likes to paint, so she'd have a place out there with a level lawn where they could paint. So they're looking to do that here. They'd build a retaining wall out of boulders over here to help elevate that grade. Currently for parking, there's parking right off here off Ocean Avenue. It's not ideal. I mean, you kind of pull in, you have to back out onto the pretty busy street. So what the plan is to actually create a loop road so they don't have to deal with backing out. So you can either come at Wharf Lane, come into here and park here, and you can also park there, or you can come this way to access that and come around like that. That does a couple things. One, they don't have to back up on Ocean Avenue. They also have a problem with people actually parking in their driveway that may be coming down to the Arundel Wharf or just visiting the town. They park there. And the town has a plan where they're going to upgrade the sidewalk along Ocean Avenue from Dock Square to basically the Arundel Wharf. Most of the sidewalk is actually going to be at grade, but once it gets in front of this property and this property, they can actually raise it, put a curb and sidewalk. So by doing this, we're actually narrowing up, which is a fairly wide curb cut, down to a narrow curb cut, so then they actually have a decent sized sidewalk that's actually elevated. The other item they want to do is they just want to do a small addition to the house. With this house being in the 75-foot setback, they can't grow the house any from a square foot standpoint because it is a non-conforming structure. So the only change is they want to add about 16 square feet to create an overhang at the front door, and they're going to take other lot coverage off so there's a balance. There was some wood steps on the back here, and I think there was some steps here, so those are coming off, which are giving them square footage to add to the front of the house. All in all, we're making it less non-conforming by pulling the impervious surfaces further from the resource. I think that's all I really need to talk about. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
I got a lot of questions.
We've got a lot of questions, okay.
Hey, Steve. Well, the first regarding the structure. So my understanding is that exterior stairs are allowed on a non-conforming structure. So I don't see how, without making it more non-conforming. So I don't see how taking those stairs, you can take that area basically and add to the structure at all.
They're wooden stairs.
They're wooden stairs.
So it's a
Exterior
structure-
stairs on the house are allowed on a non-conforming structure.
These
I
are-
don't believe it's considered part of the square footage. I may
My
be
understanding
wrong
it
there.
was.
No, we would consider that as part of the structure. You know, any required stairs for, stairs for egress, whether that be a landing, set of steps, would be considered part of the structure.
But in the land use ordinance, you can add those stairs on at any time, the exterior stairs, and it's not considered part of the structure.
Well, it's not considered an expansion of use.
Expansion of use,
Right,
right.
but
right.
the question more is, whether or not that's an expansion of structure. So if you were to add a set of stairs, so if if someone were to have a non-conforming house and they wanted to, say, relocate the front door, and then, in addition, add add a landing and another set of steps, and, those are by definition our structure, and they would also, be calculated as lot coverage.
Well, are you saying that the structure they want to put on in the front there are just stairs?
No, I'm not saying
No.
those are just stairs, but what I'm saying is that, the stairs, the stairs at the back of the house are structure. And, this proposal is a relocation of non-conforming structure, so stairs and landing being relocated, that square footage of, whatever those stairs and landing is, being relocated to another part of the exterior of the house.
Okay.
One of the things we had even asked Werner is we were hoping to put some stairs from here to go down to this lawn area, and our discussions with Werner, that's adding structure. So we couldn't do
Right.
that, unless it was
Right.
like underneath the overhang. So we could have like a granite step under the overhang, but we couldn't go beyond
No,
that, so.
no, you can add exterior stairs when they're for access to the structure,
Yeah,
interior of the structure, but you couldn't add them for lawn access or something
Yeah,
like
so-
that.
May
The-
I ask a related question? I'm getting a little confused. It sounds like we're talking both about concern for expanding the amount of impervious area, and a second and closely related concern about expanding the space of a structure that is in the 75-foot setback, a non-conforming structure. They're separate issues,
right. We
although
are
related.
reducing square footage on both of those, too. We're reducing structure square footage, and we're also reducing lot impervious surface in this proposal.
Right, and I heard Nina's concern to be about basically expanding the structure. I had always thought that was living space, but apparently that isn't.
No, you have to, look at
So-
what the
so-
definition of, what the
I don't have
definition
it
of
in front of
structure.
me, yeah.
Yeah.
No, the expansion.
Yeah,
We
I
can
mean-
do
Yeah,
this
we're not
off-
expanding
offline
living
here, but-
space, we're
Yeah,
only
they're not-
extending a canopy over the,
Right, I mean,
The
it's
door.
still, by definition,
It's
is
still
considered structure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I defer to my
it's a
code
very,
enforcement officer.
it's a very small amount of structure, but,
Obviously,
but it's
yeah.
still,
And-
it's still
and-
part
and
of
that's-
the
that's-
house.
That's only a concern because the whole lot is very small, and so small parts of
Right.
it are driving the percentage-wise. In the grand
Correct.
scheme of things, we're only talking about a few square feet.
Absolutely, yeah,
So, I think we need to weigh that as well.
correct.
When was the driveway taken
last year.
out? Has it been a year?
I don't think it's been a year, I'd have to look at it. But we documented all that with the code office when they did all that.
Okay.
They were very careful to make sure that what they were doing was on the record so that they could, do these changes.
Could you elaborate just a little bit on backing up onto Ocean Ave and exactly what you're gonna do to remedy that?
Well, right now, to park here, they have to pull in like this. So their car is parked here, so to get out of that space, you have to back up on Ocean Avenue. With this plan, other than this space, they can park anywhere in this driveway, so they can actually pull in, and then they can drive out this way, so they don't have to back up. Obviously, this space here, if they come in here, pull in, they have to back up to get out of that.
Cars on that property also pull in sideways.
They pull in sideways because they're having problems backing up. That's why they're doing it now. They actually pull right in here and they sit right in there.
Right.
And then you still get people that will park in front of the lot, which, you know,
Well, if you have a turnaround, why do you need that space to come down?
Here?
Mm-hmm.
well, we gotta have 2 parking spaces. So if they got a vehicle here, then this vehicle, if they have a car here, they only have 1 vehicle, but if they have a guest here. So they typically would probably park here, maybe a guest parks here, but if you got a car parked here and 1 there, then everybody's always having to back out versus being able to pull in.
Is there an expansion of that driveway for the surface?
No, we're actually reducing the lot
Okay,
coverage.
thank you.
What we've done is we've taken this area here, which is crosshatched, I don't know if you can see that, which was the existing parking, plus the square footage that they had for the existing driveway, and using that and reconfiguring it.
I couldn't find your calculations on that.
They're all right down in here. On the site plan, there's about 33 square feet less on lot coverage on this plan.
But in the parking space that they now pull into in the front on Ocean Ave, that's not within the 75-foot setback, right?
No, right here it's not.
But the drive you're planning to put in with impervious surface is within the 75-foot setback.
Correct, but we're also taking that away, which is a greater area than what we're adding here
In the
in
75-foot
the
setback?
75-foot setback. The high water mark's right here, so this is much closer to that than what this is. So we're taking that and moving it further away to that location.
Okay, but I was just wondering about the square footage that was in the existing driveway versus the square footage of that's staying within the 75-foot setback.
I can look at that. I'm pretty confident it's equal or probably less than, but if you'd like to know what that volume is.
My other question is, it looked like you might be taking out some trees.
There was some shrubs on there that had come out, and I talked with the Enochs, and my understanding is that anything that they took out, they actually went through the code office to get permission to do that. Most of them were shrubs. I can't remember if there was any trees, but I believe they, and Warner, correct me if I'm wrong, but I
Yeah.
believe they went through code office.
Yeah, there were some ornamentals, you know, I'd say some overgrown ornamentals on the property. They also had to go through a process of having a sewer line replaced, you know, that had some damage to it, and so, you know, there was some vegetation, you know, that had to come out to deal with the sewer line repair as well.
I think there's a
Yeah.
tree on this corner. Will that come down?
No, there's a birch tree here, there's another tree here, and there's a tree over here, and I think there's a yew, a big upright yew. Those will all remain. We may have to limb them up a little bit so that we get clearance for the vehicles, but those are all will remain.
Steve, could you explain a little bit more about the rock wall that you're putting in
This
there
here?
and what you would like to put in there? You explained that there's something would be more desirable, which would be a thinner,
They were
higher structure.
wouldn't be higher. They would like, if they could afford it, to have just a veneered stone wall or something of that type, which would have a thinner footprint if you look at it from, you know, an airplane view. Cost, my guess, is going to be pretty prohibitive on that. So the proposal was to use boulders, and then you could plant into the crevices of that. But it does take more lot coverage. So we've included the worst-case scenario in this by using the boulders for that.
So that would be riptide with,
Not
Yeah.
riprap, it'd be, you know, natural landscape boulders, you know, that have
Okay.
moss and like, you know, it'd be an attractive thing. It wouldn't be a riprap slope into there.
So I had a few questions about that wall as well. So I tried to figure out where the highest astronomical tides would be relative to the, I guess it's a topo map with the plot plans on it.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed to me that highest astronomical tide was gonna cover the base of the wall for sure. Okay. So, so a couple of concerns arise in that situation. I mean, one is fluctuation in the tides means there's gonna be flow in and flow out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's migration of fines, which could be a destabilizing factor in the wall integrity over time. That, plus the changing in the water content in the soil, could change the shear strength. So I guess my concern, it could be summarized in saying, are you sure that the soil's strong enough to take the weight of the wall and the tidal variations that's going to occur, I guess, well, certainly annually, but maybe monthly out of them, for the wall that you're proposing?
I don't see that as a concern. I mean, it'd be, you'd obviously put fabric behind the wall, you know, you'd have good stone bedding on it. So you're not gonna get the, you know, tides may come up into that. It's not like it's gonna be, you know, 3 feet underwater. You're probably just gonna hit the toe of that.
Well,
That
in
wall.
fact, that leads me into my next question, which was on sheet 5 of 5.
Mm-hmm.
Could you show the elevations of the wall? I mean, how tall is the wall? What's the bottom of the wall? Where is HAT? Because it's not
Yeah,
shown
that's
here.
kind of a typical detail.
Okay,
The wall's only 3 feet high, because the grade at the base of the wall is 7, elevation 7, the top of the wall is 10.
and could you show that on the, just add some detail in there?
Okay.
And in fact, it'd be great to show the geotextile on there too, because that'll definitely have a major improvement and impact on the durability of the wall.
You must be a structural engineer?
I used to be,
I could tell.
once upon a time.
Those are good questions.
So that, actually, I did have another question. When I was looking at the wall there,
Mm-hmm.
don't you need a 4-inch drain pipe in the,
Not with this type of wall, because it's all, the water's gonna go right through the boulders. It's not a solid,
sorry, sorry.
it's a very open wall, you know, all kinds of gaps in the stones. I don't think you're gonna have enough water pressure built up behind it to push that wall out. I mean, the size of those rocks and all, it's,
Okay.
and the material, that's all gonna be fill material placed behind it. So it'll be probably a good drainage material, so you're not gonna get that action of frost and stuff pushing that. It's only 3 feet high, and that's only, if it was a, you know, 7-foot high wall, I would probably be concerned about that, but.
Well, now knowing that the walls. Just leave it off. Don't bother it, okay. So, yeah, well, now that I know it's 3 feet tall, that's, you know, that's a lot simpler.
Okay.
But still, I'd appreciate the little more detail,
Mm-hmm. We can add
On
some
the drawing.
elevations. and-
yeah, elevations, and showing the filter fabric,
Yeah.
and commenting that you don't need the drainage pipe.
Okay, did you have some additional questions, Nina, or?
Oh, I did have one other question. So I noticed that your reference highest astronomical tide was 2016. So this last winter, we had some sort of extraordinarily high tides. How would that affect your layout here? How would that affect what you're proposing?
I don't think it would change what we're doing. I actually was down there in March to actually get photographs of what was happening out there, so we can kind of observe what was happening. And I think the water actually came roughly right into this zone right in here. That's elevation, that's actually the elevation 9, so it probably came up into this area. It did not come any further than this point on the lot, though.
Okay.
I guess I have one more question. It's about the driveway. What have you done about runoff from the driveway so that it doesn't go into the river?
It all goes down to the river. That whole area drains to the river.
So you've done nothing extra for drainage or anything? Because before you had a driveway that was gravel, and now it looks like you're gonna have a paved
Well,
driveway.
gravel has the same runoff characteristics as pavement. It's considered impervious from a stormwater runoff.
Okay.
And if anything, we're further away from the river. Now, we may be able to, portions of this will be able to pitch towards the street, but again, that's gonna get into the drainage system, which is gonna end up in the river. I mean, you're so close to it. We're not making it any worse than it is because we're actually reducing lot coverage ever so slightly, but.
All right,
I have one question, Steve. Did you do a calculation on the open area? There's that
Open
20% requirement, minimum of open space on the lot that's been left in its natural condition.
Well, total impervious is,
No, I understand that.
so if you take away the impervious, you get, you're talking about open space, meaning
No,
green.
I'm talking about, I think it's called open area, and it's defined as
Minimum
the
open
land that's been
space.
left in its original condition or is vegetated, appropriately to resemble that.
I don't know if you really have anything other than maybe this little corner here that's natural.
The grassed-in areas would be,
And I think it's the balance of, when you look at his 46, his 46.4% on the proposed, that includes the house and the driveways.
no, I understand that. I've always been a little confused, the way the land use ordinance is written, to call out separate
Sure. Right.
requirements on maximum of impervious and then
Well-
minimum of open area.
Right.
And defines them differently, but similarly. You don't have any guidance on that, Warner?
I mean, what we've typically seen, with an open space calc is that includes vegetated areas.
Correct.
Whether that be a combination of lawn, trees, things of that nature.
So I'm fine with that.
That's characteristically how we've defined that open space requirement.
Yeah. So here you'd say it would be the total lot area less the structures?
Correct. Yep. Whatever they have.
Less the driveway.
Less the structure, less the driveway.
So it would be identical to the reciprocal, if you will.
That's right.
Of the impervious area.
Exactly.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
I'm good. Never mind.
Okay, so, if there are no further questions, well, I guess I will entertain a motion to declare the thing complete so that we can proceed to public hearing. And
I'd like
get
to make that motion.
Okay,
Seconded.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Case manager?
Case manager, yeah.
Sure.
Good one, right?
Okay. Very good. All right, the final item is item 180603, Town of Kennebunkport, Wright Pierce authorized agent. A site plan review, initial review for approval of site improvements for a new sledding hill and a bicycle pump track, as well as improvements to the access road and parking. So, proceed.
Good evening, my name is Travis Pryor, landscape architect with Wright Pierce. Been working recently with the town on Parks and Rec building project to orient you with, and we had some discussions after that about potential for sledding hill on some of the town's adjacent property here, Parsons Field, School Street, it's a consolidated school. Existing conditions plan, there's generally some residential neighborhoods back here, there's 3 parcels that comprise the Parsons Field property, and then also the wastewater treatment plant. It's a proposed site plan. The major feature and goal of the town was to consider creating a sledding hill. This is generally an open field area. The sledding hill will still be grassed at the end of the day, but the slopes are going to be changed a little bit for some safety standards and also to increase some pitch at the top of the slope. So you'll have a level landing area up top. First couple 100 feet will be a little bit steeper than the grade that's out there. Carol tested it out last winter, even with some minimal snow and some hard pack, and it's hard to get started, even though it looks steep from the road. This area is comparable, though it's not showing up on the aerial image, to the steep area that is being used for sledding near this consolidated school. But we'll be incorporating those, a little bit more of an opportunity for some safe landing space or run out. You have a fairly flat area at the bottom that pitches down at 2%, and then it'll actually pitch back up at about 5%. And then we have what we're proposing is a couple-foot berm, generally around the edges and at the end. So if somebody starts to veer off to the side, they'll get guided back into the course, or ultimately to help stop them as a further stop measure at the end of the course. We're also proposing a pump track. It may be located up here. The reason we talked about it on top of the hill initially was they need to be fairly flat, even though they are a series of humps and an earthen berm track loop. We can put it further down the hill. There's some interest in doing that for a variety of reasons in terms of visibility for viewers and access. You don't have to go all the way up the top of the slope. It locates it a little bit further away from some of the residential neighborhoods. But where it's fairly flat, if you have to cut it into an embankment, it requires more earthwork to do that. But it is technically feasible to site it a little bit lower down the slope. And I'll talk a little bit more about what a pump track is in a moment. The other features we're doing are to improve the access drive. You have kind of an informal gravel access area. These properties, before they were deeded to the town, have a formal right-of-way that runs all the way to the back of the property. It's somewhat of a Jeep road, so to speak, in some portions, and it's a little bit of a 9 or 10 foot wide gravel drive now. But for life safety standards in terms of fire and ambulance access, and also for plowability, if the town wants to maintain this area for access during the winter, we're going to upgrade it to the town's ordinance standards for a paved access drive. We have a hammerhead turnaround and then some what's informal parking right now for softball activities and things like that. Just on lawn, we'll have some dedicated parking spots. And then associated drainage, there's a series of swales and ditches and actually a catch basin out in the middle of the lawn. And some culverts that the town's been maintaining, and those will be adjusted. But generally the drainage pattern is going to stay the same. A pump track, I think formally they've gained in popularity in terms of cycling for a variety of ages and user groups, and in terms of more of a formal name over the past 10 or 15 years. The idea of it is to not necessarily have to pedal with, say, a BMX style bike or even a mountain bike. Use the physical weight of your body to go up and over a series of berms that are 2 to 3 feet or so in height. And that is mostly just all in earthwork or earthen structure. There's a lot of clay available on the site, and that's what we envision using, either common borrow from other public works projects or from what we can excavate out of the hillside to build that. There's a representative photo. There aren't too many, if any, in Maine. One of the questions that was asked was whether there was something nearby that folks could go look at. There's an elementary school. Natural play is another kind of common theme that's coming up more and more these days, and they're starting to create just berms for kids to run up and down on, and it's very similar to that. There is a school down in Elliott that did that recently, and then there are other pump tracks throughout New England. I think that generally covers most of it. The town did invite abutters kind of beyond the process here at a meeting actually earlier today, and let them know about the project ahead of this review and the public workshop, just to gauge what some of their thoughts and concerns were. I think I see some of them here this evening as well. That said, unless Lori or Carol is the Parks and Rec director, and you all know, and Lori's the town manager, are also here if you have questions of them.
I have a couple questions. Of the cover letter refers to things like provision for level graded areas for future seating and sheltered areas to observe educational recreational activities at Parsons Field. Now, I don't see any of
Sure.
that on your drawing,
Nope, sorry, we do call for that level graded viewing area here.
so it's just a level graded
Yep.
viewing area that might do some of this other stuff later.
So some of the things, this is largely an earthwork, moving a lot of dirt around project. And that's part of why we asked about a pump track or mountain biking or expansion of the disc golf, or some of the other things they might want to do while they're regrading the site. And one of them was creating a level area that you may want to have temporary picnic tables or things like that for folks that come and watch the athletic events out on the fields, or maybe for people who want to watch their kids sledding or using the pump track as well. So for now, it's just a graded area. They may add
Okay.
something in the future, a picnic table or covered open air shelter, but we're not proposing any of that at this time.
For the sledding area, what would be the expected summertime use, and what kind of maintenance would the town have to provide?
It would be similar maintenance to what they have now in terms of maintaining it as an open field, probably seasonal mowing maybe once a year just to keep trees and shrubs and growth out of it. There's no intended use during the summer. They did want to look at, while they're at it, year-round compatible uses, other than just winter, which was where the idea of the pump track came about.
Well, if kids are going up the
George?
pump track, they're gonna ride
Microphone-
down it too.
Microphone, people can't hear you.
If kids are going to use the pump track in the summer, I'd assume that they're gonna wanna ride down that slope as well.
They may. We're also providing a gravel access trail up in between them. They may bike down. There's also the path that goes up currently as an extension of the gravel access drive that people use to get to the disc golf.
One of the great joys of Consolidated School was getting to bring your sled for recess and at lunchtime. Will kids have access to it during the school day at all?
We think so. Karen is here representing the school as well. They've been involved in discussions about the project. They'll have public access like everyone else said. I'm not sure. She can maybe speak more to their school's operational plans.
Hi, Karen Bubar, principal at this school. At this point, we had talked with the superintendent about potentially setting aside one day a week where we could access it. Because it is a little bit of a walk, we'd have to extend our recess, that sort of thing. So we wouldn't be able to access it every day. It would require more duty staff as well. But we talked about a once-a-week opportunity to use it.
But they feel pretty positive about that?
Yes.
I can tell you, we'd all love that.
Yeah, we'd love to be able to do that too. Yeah.
And at the same time, is sledding going to be prohibited on the hill where people have always sledded behind the gym?
So this past school year, the board did vote to prohibit sledding on that hill next to the school, and I expect that that will continue to be prohibited. Yeah.
Was that mostly from legal counsel advising? I mean, I would have to think it would, because you've got that little thing where somebody could
Goes right into the gym.
really hurt themselves.
Right, there were certainly some liability concerns, and the insurance company had done an evaluation of the playground. That was one of the recommendations.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
Yeah.
Could you help me more simply understand the dimensions of this? Like, how long is it? How wide is it? How tall is it?
Sure.
At its height?
I think we had some questions about height in particular. I've run numbers and worked with Public Works in terms of some cut fill volumes, but that final grading is not shown on this plan. So for our next submission, we plan on providing a profile, but I can talk through it here with you. You have a level grading area at the top it's 100 feet wide. It does flare out to about 135 feet in width at the bottom, just so again, if folks veer off a little bit, there's a little room for error
So
there.
normally 100 feet wide.
Yep. And it's comparable, this portion, in size to the steep hill that's behind the Consolidated School. It's about 200 feet of slope for sledding on. You then have about 150 feet of run-out area, level area for slowing down on this which does not exist at the Consolidated School slope for comparisons.
350 feet long, 200 of which
Yep.
is what
Is the
type
hill
of
that-
grade?
It ranges
Just
initially
again,
for
just
the
an average.
Yep, first 20 feet is 2 to 1, or about 50%.
Yeah.
The next 100 feet is 4 to 1, or about 25%, and then the remaining 80 feet or so is 15%.
And this would be
6 to 1.
graded to be even all the way across?
Yes.
When people
Yep,
from
yeah,
the left zooming
the
over
width
to
of
the
it,
right?
yeah, we're not creating unique tracks or
Yeah, yeah.
toboggan run type, yeah. And the idea was to keep it kind of as open as simple and to allow a decent-sized group of 10, 15, or 20 people to be able to use it at a time if they wanted to. In terms of height changes, it's, for the grades to work, the low point between that 2% down for the landing and then 5% back up creates a low point where naturally the grade just keeps going down the hill. So to get from here to the drainage, we're keeping this low point at 19 feet, which is about a 3-foot cut down into the hill. A little further up, I think the max cut is around 6 or 7 feet that will be cutting down to the ground. We're up at about elevation 60 up on top here, and the existing grade's about 48. So it's actually for the top portion of it for starting, it's gonna be about 12 feet or so above
Build it up.
existing grade and kind of level with the top of the hill. So this will be fairly flat coming across to the start of the hill from the very top of that field.
How
No
far
plans.
how far can somebody go in a tube on that thing?
It's a good question. There's,
With those angles, pretty good.
yeah. There are not a lot of, for I think mostly liability risks and reasons and doing research, there are not a lot of technical answers to that out there. 3 or 4 adults that are males or females that are 250, 300 pounds on toboggan could go quite a ways.
Yeah.
But the actual distance is not readily available. Kids on there at 40 or 50 pounds is a much different situation. There are a variety of
You would envision toboggans coming down this at speed, in other words?
I don't see them as often anymore, or that it's going to be, but there are going to be a variety of things the town's going to look at, and it's been talking with their insurance company as well, too. There are a lot of recommendations about usage and warnings and signs and things like that that go up.
There's no lighting or night usage?
Correct. No lighting is proposed for the project. Carol, you want to talk to that further? It's mostly gonna, what we're envisioning at least, is just recreational. The average person coming out with their sled they buy from a local store, not large toboggan events.
Carol Cook, Director of Parks and Recreation. So basically, in terms of what would be allowed for, I guess I'll call it a vessel, we did check with our insurance company and we checked online to get some information. So we probably will have some restrictions in place, but to say no toboggans at this point, we haven't been that definitive. As he indicated, it does depend a lot on how heavy the people are and the type of vessel that they are using. But we have already worked on a whole series of considerations, restrictions, rules that will be posted at
And
the hill.
signage.
Yes.
Right.
If it's icy,
Yeah.
shutting it down.
Right.
Yep.
So we'll have to pay attention to weather conditions and close things off if necessary.
Great.
I have a question on the access road. It doesn't look like you have very many parking spots. Are you going to allow people, if the parking spots are filled, to park on the side of the access road? Will it be wide enough?
This would be a town policy to consider. I think currently it's not, technically it's not then an open access road, meeting the town's ordinance if you allow on. We're not accommodating parking along the side of it. Similar actually to when we went to the Parks and Recreation building, there's parking available on the access drive to that Parks building that's used for these facilities. And then when we were looking at that site, we also talked about the overflow or parking that does occur out here. So the parking is shared around that entire Parsons field.
Because I know there are parents who like to sit, especially with young kids who like to sit and watch and make sure everything's going okay.
Yep. So, and they're doing it now. They're out there for softball tonight. We're just providing them with a gravel parking spot instead of lawn.
I don't really know what to add to that, other than, I guess, to say that as you come down here, we've only indicated the basically 7 spaces there, but we're able currently to park roughly 35 cars along here. They all just come in and pull into the parking this way. They'll be able to park there, they'll be able to park past there. This access here is also firm, and will be primarily probably snow blowed off in order to allow access from the school for the children to come across. And then with the new recreation building being here, there's additional parking here, and there's always available parking at the school, particularly in the winter months. So, as he indicated, it's a continued use, if you will, of what already exists, which is people park wherever they can. He's just designated some specific areas.
Okay.
Is there other facilities envisioned in terms of restrooms or this type of thing?
Well, you see, that's the good news with our new recreation building. We have, the recreation building is designed in a way that the restrooms can be open to the outside without accessing the rest of the building. So on weekends, if we want to have things opened up during legitimate hours for sledding, we can do that.
So this truly is a part of a recreational complex. It's not a I mean, it is a standalone project in terms of its execution, but the vision
It is a site improvement.
That's correct.
is part of a recreation
Much needed.
complex.
That's correct.
Right.
Yes.
I understand, that wasn't coming through.
Right,
Maybe it
and
was
we also
obvious.
have in the new recreation building, there's also a kitchen/concession area. So we could conceivably have,
Hot
the
chocolate.
traditional hot chocolate
There you go.
served out of there if that were the case.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
The currently this piece of land is just owned by the town, it is not anything officially other than a hunk of land?
It's correct, yes.
Okay,
Vacant piece
so
of
we
property.
are doing a
Vacant piece of
conditional
property.
use approval of
Correct.
this as a park?
That's right.
Okay.
Do these plans, whatever the lot, the impervious coverage is of that area today, how will it change with this project?
I have not run those numbers for this one. I did for the Parks and Rec Department building. They were not anywhere close to the
Yeah.
minimum or maximum requirements, but we are expanding the gravel access drive, so that's a
So you
good
will-
question.
you will be doing, yeah.
I'll give you those numbers.
Yeah, that would be useful.
Now, are those numbers required for our approval, or are they required for building permits for the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good piece of information to have in terms of, the amount of road surface that you have there. But once you get outside of the shoreline zone, then, this type of gravel access or road, doesn't fall under the definition of lot coverage. So, not technically a number that you need to,
I think the building itself on the site increased it from 0.8% to 1.2 or something like that.
It's in the small numbers is what you're telling me.
Right.
Thank you. And
But I don't know for certain.
Werner's reminding me that it's not regulated anyway. You just get us
It's
trained.
hard for you
and
guys
then-
to shift gears from project to project. A lot of numbers to think about.
Thank you.
I hear you're trying to build something that's compliant. We're not used to that. We're used to non-compliant.
So this change that you're making to the access road to bring it up to town standards, that's got to be something that the emergency services and fire department would get behind. I mean,
Yes,
that's
that's the
that's
primary
all-
reason
that's
why
all
we're
good,
upgrading
right?
it. Yep, and we have a hammerhead turnaround, and we're
and I'm sure the
increasing-
insurance people will be happy with that improvement as well.
So I just had a couple of questions. So I'm going to reinforce Ed's request and your commitment to provide a profile next time we see it. So could you also provide a cross-section?
Yes.
Like in the hill, so, just to see what
Yep.
it's like, okay. And then, as I was sitting here, I was thinking, so you're going to make a hill, then you're going to have a kind of a little slope down and then a slope up. So is this going to create any drainage issues where you have to have some kind of underflow drain to keep it dry, or so you don't have a kind of a swamp somewhere during whenever children might be using it?
It would if we were cutting down lower than the ability for that water to drain out of there, which is why we're raising the elevation up at our starting point here so that we can have an elevation of 19 so that it can drain out to the elevation of 17 down at that culvert.
Natural drainage is going to be enough?
Correct.
Okay.
I just have one last question. The neighbor who's at the end of that run.
Yeah.
Has there ever been any problems with the yard, going into the yard or anything like that?
With what going to the yard, I'm sorry?
Sledding going into the yard?
Yeah, there's a significant kind of perennial stream / ditch in between the two properties. The site hasn't really been used for sledding much in the past, my understanding. But Carol's actually reached out and talked to that abutter, so she can talk about that experience a little bit.
Yeah, that's Joe O'Connor, and I did give her a call yesterday to invite her to the meeting that we had earlier, as well as to attend tonight's meeting with you. And she said she was actually very excited about it. So having children of her own, I think she's not intimidated by having the noise of happy children in her backyard. So. Yeah, she was pleased with the concept that it was going to remain grass in its appearance, and that it wouldn't, oh, it's better than a sewer treatment plant.
Okay, well. So if we approve this as complete, can we get what Larry was asking for, Larry and Ed, I guess, one extra drawing for the next time?
We made notes actually earlier talking with the abutters about that. They had similar questions.
Yeah, so if we can get those for the public hearing, that'd be wonderful.
I'll make a motion to deem the application complete with those drawings.
George, you want to second that?
You're up next.
I think it's you.
It's you
I'll
again.
second if you,
There we
if you
go.
want to vote.
All in favor?
That's good enough for me.
Okay. So, we'll see you again in 2 weeks.
Do you want me to take this as case manager?
I was wondering if you wanted to take the nickel one.
I can't, you guys, if you guys, I can give you.
Okay, I'll do that, I'll do that. I will
So
need
I'll take
someone.
I'm here one more
Oh,
week.
okay. All right.
Okay, so I'm case manage this one.
Combo, okay.
I did the last town thing too. All right, well, I'll take one more motion.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
In favor?
You could vote on that.
You're-
Yeah, I'll vote on that one.
We're done.
That's right. Okay, thank you.
We didn't go till 10 o'clock.